My name is Dr. Kate Boyd, and in celebration of the new year, today I'm going to talk about goal setting. I'm talking about this from my vantage point as a pianist, but really it's applicable to other musicians as well. To accompany this video, I've created a free downloadable PDF on goal setting for pianists and other musicians, and you can download it at the link below. When you want to play the piano or any instrument at a high level, setting goals is a very important step to take. There are 3 reasons that goal setting is useful and helpful for musicians. First, it's a way to get your project off to a great start. You can capitalize on the momentum of having a fresh start and renewed energy by setting some ambitious goals for yourself. Second, it truly takes a long time to learn and master repertoire at the piano. It's easy to lose focus and not be sure how to use your practice time effectively. So, setting goals and systematically working toward them helps you actually learn more pieces. Third, it's tremendously motivating to set goals and have something specific to work toward. Otherwise, you can be busy and spend your time working hard, but not necessarily have much to show for it. A helpful and popular framework around goals is a framework referring to S.M.A.R.T goals. S.M.A.R.T goals are specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time-bound. Setting S.M.A.R.T goals in the practice room can actually be very helpful to musicians when the outcome of practice tends not to always be clear-cut. For example, setting a goal to practice more or learn this Beethoven sonata is not a S.M.A.R.T goal. A S.M.A.R.T goal is something actionable that you can measure. So maybe your goal is to learn a Beethoven sonata. How do you measure that? We're not creating widgets here. What we're doing is actually pretty difficult to measure. Unlike something like exercise or weight that you might use a stopwatch or a scale to measure, it's hard to determine exactly when something is learned, and even learning something is a moving target. But you can measure it by establishing some benchmarks for yourself. So, for that Beethoven sonata I mentioned a minute ago, here are some actionable benchmarks that you could turn into S.M.A.R.T goals. Dividing it up and focusing on note security for each section. Being able to play it from memory without memory slips 3 times in a row. Learning X number of measures in a practice session to the point where it's hands together with correct rhythms and notes. Getting the whole piece to your performance tempo as measured by a metronome. Recording it and listening back to yourself X times or by X date. In my own work at the piano, I found that goal setting is crucial for my own progress. Otherwise, I get sidetracked by urgent but less important things, and then days can go by without actually making progress on the things that are most important to me. Today, I have 8 tips for goal setting at the piano, or really any instrument, and how it can help you make progress this year. My first tip is to write it down. It's very easy to have a goal in your head for a while and then sort of have it fade with time as other priorities move in and compete with your original goal. Once you commit a goal to paper, you're holding yourself accountable. When you write it down, make sure it's a very specific plan. Be as specific as possible. Is your goal a recital performance? A competition? An audition? What specific pieces are you preparing for this? What is the date? Do you have an artistic or technical goal? Get specific and write it down. This will help keep you focused and prevent you from getting distracted from the larger goal you're working toward. My second tip is to work backward from the performance date and set intermediate goals. For example, let's say you have an upcoming performance date that will be 4 months from now. List out the checkpoints on the way that will serve as intermediate goals. How will you know you're on track to the larger goal? How long will it realistically take to get to each checkpoint along the way? Write these checkpoints down too in your calendar. My third tip is, after you set intermediate goals, map things out backward and set weekly goals. You can look at when you have lessons and studio classes and use them as events to help support the checkpoints you just established. For example, if you're learning a piece and you want to perform it 4 months from now, you might decide that the piece needs to be completely memorized 6 weeks prior to the performance. Before that, you need to be able to learn all the notes, bring it up to tempo, master the technical spots, and develop an interpretive plan. Each of those is a checkpoint. So, working backwards, you can set weekly goals for what you will bring to your lessons, play for studio class if you have it, your own playthroughs for yourself, online playthroughs, and other performances. And now for my fourth tip. From your weekly goals, you can set daily goals. For example, if you need to memorize a certain amount of material in a week in order to stay on track to your next checkpoint, you can divide the weekly goal by 7 into an amount that you can reasonably learn each day. This day-to-day planning will require self-awareness and flexibility. I recommend taking time at the beginning of each week and looking at your weekly practice goals, then map out what you need to do on each piece each day of the week. So at the end of each practice day, take some time to evaluate what you did and then adjust your next day's practice plan accordingly. For example, maybe it didn't take you as long to learn the notes for a piece as you'd expected. You had outlined in your day-to-day practice for that week that you would need 3 days to learn the notes, but you feel quite secure after only 2 days. So you can revise the next day's practice to reflect that you will only need to review, not learn new notes on that piece. On the other hand, maybe you didn't get all the way through the whole section of a piece that you'd mapped out for the week. Maybe you intended to learn measures 1 to 60, but it was harder than you thought and you only got to measure 24. So you'd need to revise the next day's practice to adjust your learning goal accordingly. Now here's a bonus tip for you. With regard to memorization, I recommend memorizing 1 line at a time and working from the end. So that means if you're in the habit of memorizing 1 line a day, you'll memorize 7 lines a week, and over time, memorizing will become second nature and part of your routine. My 5th tip is to make a plan for every practice session. Now that you've mapped out your long-term, intermediate, weekly, and daily goals, you will be able to make a plan for each practice session. Decide ahead of time what your outcome will be by the end of that day's practice. What specifically do you want to be able to do that you couldn't do at the beginning of your practice time? If you're learning several pieces and they're at different stages of the learning process, you'll find that you can plan your practice so you are interleaving the pieces, working toward a specific goal on piece A, for example, and then switching to piece B, and then after working toward that goal, switching back to piece A and continuing your work. This tends to be a more effective practice method than just spending a ton of time on a single piece. And here's my second bonus tip for you. If you get stuck on one piece for too long, that's usually a sign that what you're doing is too big or too ambitious for one practice session. If that's the case, break it down further. Instead of learning a whole movement, focus on the last page. If it takes you 20 minutes to get through a small section hands together, learn a shorter segment hands separate first. You should have something attainable by the end of each practice session. My 6th tip is to know your strengths and weaknesses. For example, my strengths in the practice room are that I can focus and learn music pretty quickly. One of my weaknesses is that if I get distracted or take a break, I might get so distracted I don't finish my practice session. Once you know your strengths and weaknesses, you can create habits, structures, and systems to accommodate them. For me, I make sure I turn off my phone and I keep a pad of paper next to me at the piano so I can write down distracting thoughts as they come into my head so I can deal with them later. My 7th tip is to set your goals in cooperation with your teacher if you have one. I always encourage my students to map out what they want to bring into their upcoming lessons, and as their teacher, I can help hold them accountable if they come to me with their learning goals mapped out. I can also help them set reasonable expectations for themselves and adjust their own goals accordingly. If you don't have a teacher, find someone who can be your accountability buddy. Somebody who you can tell your goals to and somebody you can update as you keep working toward your goals. It can also be helpful to post your goals to social media or otherwise make your goals public. My final tip is to be kind to yourself. The point of setting goals is not to give yourself a cudgel to beat yourself up with. The purpose is to provide clarity and focus and help you move toward a goal with purpose. There will be some days where you don't achieve what you planned or wanted to. You're not a machine, you're a human being. When that happens, take some time to figure out what happened. Did you plan to do more in a week than was realistic? Do you feel uninspired by what you're working on? Do you need more variety in your practice routine? What can you do to help yourself out? Think about that and adjust your plan. Through frequent dialogue with yourself, you'll get to know yourself better and understand how to support your own learning patterns and needs. Don't forget to grab my free downloadable PDF on goal setting for pianists and other musicians. I've posted the link below in the description section of this video. Meanwhile, in the comments, please let me know what your big goals are this year. If you liked this video and found it helpful, please hit the subscribe button and like this video so you don't miss my future content. In my next video, I'm going to talk about how to keep a practice journal. See you there and happy practicing.